The surgical discharge papers were still warm in my hand when I saw them. 5 black garbage bags lined up against the wrought iron gate like sentinels of rejection. My son David stood there with his wife Ashley, both wearing expressions I'd seen them use when discussing expired milk. "You're getting too old, so it's time for you to live somewhere else," Ashley announced, her voice carrying that practiced sweetness she used on difficult customers at her boutique. "If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from." I stood there for a moment, fresh from gallbladder surgery, watching my entire life stuffed into trash bags. The irony wasn't lost on me. 68 years old, and apparently I'd become the garbage. But here's the thing about being discarded. Sometimes it's exactly the kick in the pants you need. I looked at David, my son who I'd raised alone after his father died, who I'd put through college working double shifts at the diner. The same David who'd moved into my house 18 months ago because his startup was having cash flow issues. Funny how his cash flow issues became my housing crisis. "Well," I said, my voice steady as granite, "I guess that settles it then." I smiled. Not the broken smile of a defeated woman, but the knowing smile of someone who'd just seen behind the curtain. Ashley shifted uncomfortably. She'd expected tears, begging, maybe a dramatic collapse to make them feel appropriately guilty. Instead, I walked to my car, popped the trunk, and started loading my life into the back of my Honda Civic. "Mom, wait," David started, but I cut him off with a look that could freeze hell. "No need to explain, sweetheart. You've made your position crystal clear." I hefted the last bag into my car, noting how surprisingly light 40 years of accumulated possessions could be when someone else decided what was worth keeping. As I drove away, I caught sight of them in my rearview mirror. Ashley was already pulling out her phone, probably texting her friends about how they'd finally dealt with the mother-in-law situation. David just stood there, looking like a man who'd won a battle but wasn't sure he wanted the war. Poor baby. Nothing quite like the guilt of throwing your mother away to ruin a perfectly good day of playing house with stolen real estate. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a furnished studio apartment I'd rented by the month, sorting through my new life one garbage bag at a time. That's when I found it, buried under some old sweaters Ashley had deemed too outdated to donate. A business card I'd forgotten I had, given to me by Eleanor Richardson at the hospital gift shop where I'd been volunteering. Eleanor, who'd started her own company at 72 and become a millionaire by 75. But that's a story for tomorrow. Tonight, I had planning to do. 3 days after my son threw me away like yesterday's newspaper, I was sitting across from Eleanor Richardson in her corner office, watching her pour tea from a service that probably cost more than David's monthly rent. "Helen, dear," she said, her blue eyes sharp as broken glass behind her designer frames. "You look terrible." I laughed. Actually, laughed. "Well, Eleanor, that's what happens when your family decides you're past your expiration date." I told her everything. The garbage bags, Ashley's dismissive tone, David's cowardice. Eleanor listened without interruption, occasionally making soft humming sounds that I'd learned meant she was calculating something. "How much money do you have?" she asked when I finished. "About 30,000 in savings, and the house is paid off." "Was paid off," I corrected myself bitterly. "David's been living there rent-free for 18 months. I suppose it's his now. Legally? My name's still on the deed, for now." I could practically see the wheels turning in Eleanor's head. She'd built her empire buying struggling businesses and turning them into gold mines. The look she was giving me now was the same one she probably gave those businesses. "Here's what we're going to do," she said, leaning forward with the intensity of a general planning a siege. "First, you're going to stop feeling sorry for yourself. Second, you're going to get angry, really angry. And third, you're going to let me teach you how to turn that anger into cold, hard cash." Well, at least someone thought my rage had commercial potential. I blinked. "Eleanor, I'm 68 years old. I've never run a business. I worked in a diner for 30 years and volunteered at the hospital gift shop. And in those 30 years, how many customers did you serve? How many problems did you solve? How many difficult people did you manage?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Running a business isn't rocket science, Helen. It's about understanding what people need and figuring out how to give it to them better than anyone else." She pulled out a leather portfolio and slid it across the desk. I've been looking for someone to partner with on a project, someone with your particular background. I opened the portfolio to find photographs of a rundown strip mall. Food service, she explained. But not just any food service. Comfort food, real comfort food, the kind desperate people pay premium prices for when they're too tired or too busy to cook. You want me to open a restaurant? I want you to open a revolution. Her smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. Think about it, Helen. Who knows comfort food better than someone who's spent 30 years serving it? Who understands customer service better than someone who's dealt with hangry truckers at 3 a.m? And who has more motivation to succeed than someone with nothing left to lose? The proposal was elegant in its simplicity. Eleanor would provide the startup capital and business guidance. I would provide the operational expertise and sweat equity. Profits would be split 60-40 in my favor after she recouped her initial investment. But there was one condition, a condition that made my smile turn predatory. We wouldn't just be opening anywhere. We'd be opening directly across the street from Ashley's precious boutique. Now, Eleanor said, pouring more tea, let's talk about making your son very, very sorry. I had to admit, I was starting to like Eleanor's definition of business strategy. The next morning, I drove to my old house to collect the mail they'd been too considerate to forward. David's Tesla was gone, probably at his office, which was really just a WeWork space where he spent most of his time playing ping pong with other unemployed millennials who called themselves entrepreneurs. Ashley's Range Rover sat in the driveway, gleaming white like her conscience should have been. I used my key for what I assumed would be the last time. The house smelled different already. Some expensive candle Ashley burned that gave me headaches. Vanilla narcissism, if I had to guess the scent. The mail was piled on the kitchen counter, mixed with their bills like they'd been living here for years instead of months. Most of it was junk, but one envelope made my heart skip. Property tax assessment. I opened it without hesitation. My name was still on everything after all. The house I'd bought for $60,000 30 years ago was now assessed at $420,000. I'd had no idea. Helen? Ashley's voice carried down the stairs, sharp with surprise and something that might have been guilt. She appeared at the top of the staircase in yoga pants and a sports bra, looking every inch the Instagram influencer she aspired to be. Because nothing says serious businesswoman like wearing your workout clothes to conduct a hostile takeover of someone else's house. What are you doing here? Collecting my mail, I said pleasantly, waving the tax bill. Imagine my surprise to discover I'm still responsible for property taxes on a house I apparently don't live in anymore. The color drained from her perfectly contoured face. We're handling the paperwork. David said he'd take care of everything. Oh, I'm sure he did. David was excellent at taking care of things, especially when those things belonged to other people. Just like he took care of telling me I was being evicted. Such a thoughtful boy. Ashley descended the stairs slowly, like a cat approaching a potentially dangerous dog. Helen, I think there was a misunderstanding. We just thought you might be happier somewhere, more appropriate for someone your age. Ah, the classic. When you can't defend your actions, call them a misunderstanding. You mean somewhere David didn't have to look at me and remember that his startup is failing while his 68-year-old mother pays his bills. Direct hit. Ashley's composure cracked just enough for me to see the calculation underneath. It's not about money, isn't it? I looked around my living room, noting how they'd already rearranged the furniture and hung their own artwork. Tell me, Ashley, how long have you two been planning this little intervention? Since before you moved in? Or did the idea come to you after you realized how convenient it was to have someone else pay the mortgage while you played house? We never asked you to. You didn't have to ask. That's the beautiful thing about being family, isn't it? You just take what you need and assume the other person will understand. I headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, one more thing. Since my name is still on the deed, I'll be making some changes around here, starting with this. I pulled out my phone and took several photos of their belongings, their modifications to my house, their obvious assumption that they belonged here. What are you doing? Documentation, I said sweetly. For my lawyer. Turns out I have quite a few legal options when it comes to people who've been living in my house without a lease. I left her standing there, mouth agape, probably calculating how quickly they could afford a deposit on their own place. The drive to Eleanor's office was the most satisfying 20 minutes I'd had in months. But when I walked into her building, I discovered she had company. A tall, silver-haired man in an expensive suit was shaking her hand as I approached. "Helen, perfect timing," Eleanor said. "I'd like you to meet Marcus Webb. He owns the strip mall we discussed yesterday." Marcus turned to me with a smile that was probably lethal to women 40 years younger. "Miss Camden, Eleanor tells me you're going to be our new anchor tenant." Our eyes met, and something electric passed between us. Oh, this was getting interesting. Marcus Webb had the kind of voice that made ordering coffee sound like a romantic proposition. Smooth, deep, with just a hint of a southern accent that suggested good manners and better bourbon. As Eleanor explained our business plan, I found myself studying his hands. No wedding ring, but a pale band where one used to be. Recent divorce, I'd bet my last dollar. "The location is perfect," Eleanor was saying, spreading blueprints across the conference table. "High foot traffic, easy parking, and the demographic is exactly what we're targeting. Busy professionals, stressed out parents, people who want quality food without the pretension." Marcus nodded, but his eyes kept finding mine. "What kind of experience do you have in the restaurant industry, Miss Camden?" 30 years serving food to people who hadn't eaten in 10 hours and had been driving for 12, I replied. "If I can keep truckers happy at 3 in the morning with a smile and a hot meal, I figure suburban soccer moms should be a piece of cake." He laughed, a real laugh, not the polite chuckle most people gave when they weren't sure if I was joking. "I like her," he told Eleanor. "She's got grit." "Oh, you have no idea," Eleanor murmured, shooting me a look that suggested she knew exactly what kind of week I'd been having. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me with the intensity of someone who'd made his fortune reading people. "Tell me, Helen, may I call you Helen? What made you decide to start a restaurant at this stage of your life?" I could have given him the sanitized version. Could have talked about following dreams or embracing new challenges. Instead, I looked him dead in the eye and told him the truth. My son and his wife threw me out of my own house last week, put my belongings in garbage bags, and told me I was too old to live with decent people. So I figured it was time to show them what this old woman is really capable of. The room went quiet. Eleanor smiled like a shark scenting blood. Marcus set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "Good," he said finally. "The best businesses are built on revenge." By the time I left that meeting, I had a lease agreement, a realistic timeline of 16 weeks for construction and opening, and something I hadn't expected. Marcus's business card with his personal number written on the back. "In case you need anything," he'd said, his fingers brushing mine as he handed it over. Anything at all. I drove home to my studio apartment feeling like a different person than the woman who'd left that morning. I had plans now, purpose, and if I was being honest with myself, I had the first fluttering of attraction I'd felt since my husband died 5 years ago. My phone buzzed as I was heating up a frozen dinner. David's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker while I ate my sad little portion of teriyaki chicken. "Mom, it's me. Ashley told me you came by the house today. She said you were upset about some paperwork. Look, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding, and I think we can work this out. Call me back, okay?" Interesting how quickly a calculated eviction became a misunderstanding once legal documents got involved. I deleted the message without finishing my dinner. There had been no misunderstanding. There had been a revelation. The difference was crucial. The next morning, I was back at the strip mall, walking through my future restaurant with a contractor Eleanor had recommended. The space was bigger than it looked from outside. 1,500 square feet, with a small kitchen in back and room for about 40 seats. It needed work, but good bones, as my grandmother used to say. "We can have you up and running in 16 weeks, the contractor said, scribbling notes on his tablet. "Full renovation, kitchen equipment, permits, health department approvals, the works. Eleanor's given us a generous budget to work with." As he talked about fixtures and flooring, I found myself staring out the front window. Directly across the street, Ashley's boutique was opening for the day. She was arranging clothes in the window display, moving with the self-important bustle of someone who thought she was building an empire instead of playing dress-up with other people's money. Perfect view, I thought. Just perfect. Nothing like a front-row seat to watch karma work its magic. The construction started on a Tuesday, which meant Ashley had a front-row seat to watch my resurrection. I made sure to be there every morning at 7, coffee in hand, watching the contractors tear out everything that didn't serve my purpose. Sort of like what I was doing with my own life. Marcus stopped by most days, always with some excuse about checking on the electrical work or discussing lease terms. Today, he brought lunch, real lunch from some upscale deli downtown, not the gas station sandwiches I'd been living on. "You don't have to feed me," I told him. But I was already unwrapping what looked like the world's most perfect turkey club. "I know I don't have to," he said, settling onto a makeshift seat made from overturned buckets. "I want to. There's a difference." We ate in comfortable silence while the contractors worked around us. The space was already starting to take shape. Warm, honey-colored wood for the floors, deep green paint for the accent wall, industrial light fixtures that managed to look both modern and timeless. "Tell me about your marriage," Marcus said suddenly, then immediately looked embarrassed. "Sorry, that was presumptuous. It's just, Eleanor mentioned you'd been married for a long time." 38 years, I said. "Bill died 5 years ago. Cancer. It was slow. I didn't usually talk about it, but something about Marcus made the words come easier. He was a good man, steady, kind. We built a quiet life together, nothing dramatic, just solid and real." "That sounds nice," Marcus said wistfully. "My wife left me 2 years ago. Said I was boring. Apparently spending 40 years building a real estate empire wasn't exciting enough for her. She wanted adventure, romance, passion." He laughed bitterly. "She got it too, with my business partner. They're living in Costa Rica now on money that used to be half mine. I'm sorry. Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. Sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what you actually want." He looked around the construction chaos with approval. "Speaking of which, how's your son handling your new venture?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the call log. 23 missed calls from David in the past 2 weeks. He's persistent. I'll give him that. "You haven't talked to him?" "What's to talk about? He made his position clear. Now I'm making mine clear." I took another bite of the sandwich, which was honestly the best thing I'd eaten in weeks. "Besides, I'm too busy to chat. I have a business to build." Marcus smiled, not the careful, polite smile most people gave me, but something warmer, more real. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think your son made the biggest mistake of his life when he underestimated you." "Well, that made 2 of us, too. Though to be fair, I'd been underestimating myself for quite a while, too." That afternoon, I got my first glimpse of exactly how big David's mistake was going to be. Eleanor arrived with a folder full of paperwork and a smile that should have come with a warning label. "I've had my private investigator making some calls," she said, settling into the passenger seat of my car where we could watch the construction and talk privately. "About David and his startup. And it's worse than I thought. He's not just failing. He's failing spectacularly. He owes money to investors, vendors, even his former employees. The company is going to be officially bankrupt within the month." I felt a twist in my stomach that might have been satisfaction or might have been grief. "How do you know all this?" "Because I pay people to know things, and because I've been thinking about investing in his space." Eleanor's smile turned predatory. "Distressed assets can be very profitable if you know what you're doing." The implications hit me slowly. "Eleanor, what exactly are you planning?" "Nothing illegal, nothing unethical, just justice." She pulled a document from her folder. "David's been using your house as collateral for his business loans. Did you know that?" My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "I mean he's been forging your signature on financial documents for the past 2 years, using your property to secure funding for his company. When the business goes under, and it will, the creditors are going to come after everything he's pledged as collateral." The folder suddenly felt heavy in my hands. "Including my house. Including your house. Unless, of course, someone with deeper pockets and better lawyers gets there first." The next morning, I walked into the law office of Patricia Hammond with a folder full of documents and a fury so cold it could have powered a small city. Patricia was Eleanor's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in her 50s who specialized in what she called family asset protection and what I was starting to think of as taking back what's mine. "This is fraud," Patricia said after reviewing the papers Eleanor had gathered. "Clear, documentable fraud. Your son has been using your property as collateral without your knowledge or consent. That's forgery at minimum, potentially criminal misrepresentation depending on how much money we're talking about. How much are we talking about? Patricia consulted her notes. Based on the investigation Eleanor commissioned, approximately $200,000 in secured debt against your property. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000. More than I'd made in 5 years at the diner. More than the original purchase price of my house. How is that even possible? Because banks don't always verify signatures as carefully as they should, especially when the collateral is substantial and the borrower presents well. Patricia's voice carried the disgust of someone who'd seen this scenario too many times. Your son is charismatic, educated, and he's been working this system for 2 years. What are my options? Legally, we file a fraud complaint, freeze all the assets, and let the courts sort it out. That could take years, and you'd likely lose the house anyway to legal fees. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Or we get creative. Creative how? Eleanor didn't tell you about her offer? I looked between them, feeling like I was missing something crucial. What offer? Eleanor spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. I'm prepared to purchase your house from you for its full market value. Cash. Closing in 45 days. You'd be free and clear of all David's debts, and you'd have enough capital to fully fund the restaurant plus a substantial nest egg. But where would I live? Eleanor's smile could have lit up downtown. That's the beautiful part. Marcus has a lovely carriage house behind his main property, fully furnished, private, and he's offered it to you as part of a property management arrangement. You'd oversee his rental properties and maintenance scheduling in exchange for housing and a modest salary. The pieces were falling into place with mathematical precision. And David? David would come home to find his house sold out from under him, just like he sold you out from under yours, Patricia said matter-of-factly. Poetic justice, some might call it. I sat in silence for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what they were proposing. It was elegant. It was complete. It was absolutely ruthless. There's one more thing, Eleanor added softly. The restaurant. I've been thinking about the name. What about it? Given everything that's happened, given where you started and where you're going, I think it should be called Second Chances. What do you think? I thought about David, probably sitting in his borrowed office right now, making promises he couldn't keep with money he didn't have. I thought about Ashley, arranging clothes in her boutique window, completely oblivious to the storm heading her way. I thought about the garbage bags, the dismissive words, the casual cruelty of being declared too old to matter. I think, I said slowly, that sounds perfect. Patricia was already reaching for her phone. I'll call the title company. We can have papers ready by tomorrow. But even as I nodded agreement, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Mom, please call me. There's something I need to tell you. It's important. Too little. Too late, I thought. But something in the desperate tone of his message made me wonder what other surprises my son had in store for me. Knowing David, it was probably something that would make forging my signature look like a minor administrative error. I called David back from the parking lot of Patricia's office, with Eleanor and the lawyer as witnesses to whatever was about to unfold. He picked up on the first ring. Mom, thank God. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for days. His voice carried that particular strain I remembered from his teenage years when he'd been caught in a lie. I've been busy, David, building a life. You should try it sometime. I put the call on speaker so my allies could hear whatever confession was coming. Look, I need to tell you something, and I need you to not freak out, okay? The words tumbled out in a rush. There might be some paperwork issues with the house. Some documents that got mixed up when I was trying to help manage your finances. Oh, how considerate. He was managing my finances by stealing them. Mixed up how? A long pause. Then, I might have accidentally used the house as collateral for some business loans. But it's temporary, Mom. The company's about to get a huge investment, and I'll clear everything up within the month. Accidentally, right? The same way someone accidentally robs a bank. Patricia raised her eyebrows. Eleanor looked like Christmas morning. I just felt tired. David, I said quietly, did you forge my signature? I wouldn't call it forging. I was just trying to help us both. You needed someone to handle your financial affairs, and I needed some bridge funding until, oh, how noble. Stealing from your mother to fund your failing business. They should give out humanitarian awards for that level of selflessness. Did. You forge my signature. Another pause. Longer this time. Yes. But Mom, I can fix this. The investors are definitely interested, and once the funding comes through. I hung up on him mid-sentence and looked at Patricia. I believe that constitutes a confession. Recorded and witnessed, Patricia confirmed with satisfaction. More than enough for what we need. The house sale moved forward with legal precision over the next 6 weeks. I signed the papers in Patricia's office while David was across town, desperately trying to explain to his creditors why the collateral they thought they had was no longer available. Eleanor had structured the sale brilliantly, buying the property through one of her shell companies, clearing all liens, and leaving David with nothing but his failing business and a pile of debt he couldn't hide behind my assets anymore. I moved into Marcus's carriage house that weekend. It was like stepping into a fairy tale after months of living in that cramped studio. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, hardwood floors, and windows that looked out onto gardens. Marcus tended himself. He helped me carry my boxes, which was really unnecessary, but gave us an excuse to be in the same space together. The property management duties are fairly light, he said, as we finished unloading my car. Mostly coordinating maintenance for my 3 rental properties and handling tenant issues when they arise. Nothing too demanding. What's the catch? I asked, because in my experience, deals this good always came with hidden costs. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, studying me with those dark eyes that seemed to see everything. No catch. Just company, I suppose. It gets quiet here by myself. Something warm unfurled in my chest. Well, I do make excellent coffee. I was hoping you'd say that. The restaurant opened 16 weeks later on a crisp October morning, with every permit properly filed and every health department requirement meticulously met. Eleanor had invited half the town. Marcus had somehow convinced every business owner in the district to stop by, and I had strategically timed the opening for Ashley's lunch break, so she'd have a perfect view of my success. The first customer through the door was Margaret Thompson, the 75-year-old retired principal who lived in Marcus's neighborhood. She ordered the meatloaf special and proclaimed it better than my grandmother's, which was high praise considering Margaret's grandmother had fed 8 children through the Depression. By noon, we had a line out the door. Real customers, not just the charity crowd Eleanor had worried about. People were ordering seconds, asking about catering, taking photos to post on social media. The register kept ringing, and I kept smiling until my face hurt. Helen! Eleanor appeared at my elbow during a brief lull, her eyes bright with excitement. Do you see the woman in the red coat by the window? I looked where she was pointing. A stylish brunette in her 60s was photographing her salmon salad with professional precision. Food blogger? Food critic. Charlotte Stevens from the Metro Weekly. She does the restaurant reviews that make or break places. Eleanor practically vibrated with excitement. She's been here for 40 minutes. That's a good sign. Through the front window, I could see Ashley standing in her boutique doorway, watching our crowd with an expression like she'd bitten into something rotten. A petty part of me hoped the critic noticed the contrast. My bustling restaurant full of happy customers versus Ashley's empty store with its overpriced clothes and attitude problem. Poor thing. It must be so hard watching success happen to people you've written off as worthless. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, rolling up his sleeves. Need help back here? You don't know how to cook, I protested, but I was already tying an apron around his waist. Having him close felt natural in a way that should have scared me but didn't. I can follow orders, he said, bumping my shoulder gently. Tell me what to do. We worked together through the lunch rush like we'd been doing it for years instead of hours. Marcus proved surprisingly adept at plating salads and keeping track of order tickets. More importantly, he made me laugh even when the pressure was building and tickets were backing up. Behind you, gorgeous, he murmured as he passed me with a tray of clean plates, and I felt myself blush like a teenager. The critic left without introducing herself, which Eleanor said was standard practice. We'd know what she thought when the review came out next week, but the rest of the day was an unqualified success. We served 97 customers, ran out of 3 menu items, and had reservations booked through the following weekend. That evening, as I was tallying the day's receipts, my phone rang. Unknown number. Second chances. This is Helen. Mom. David's voice was small, defeated. I saw the restaurant on Instagram. It looks really nice. Thank you. I also got served with papers today about the house fraud. Patricia Hammond is representing you? She is. A long silence. Then, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. I never meant for it to get this bad. I looked around my kitchen, at the successful business I'd built from nothing, at the life I was creating for myself at 68. I know you didn't mean for it to get bad, David. You meant for it to stay hidden. That's not... He stopped himself. You're right. That's exactly what I meant. Is there something you need, or are you just calling to apologize? Ashley left me. The words came out in a rush. This morning. She said she couldn't be married to someone facing criminal charges. She took most of our stuff and moved back to her mother's. Well. Turns out Ashley's love was about as deep as her commitment to paying her own bills. Who could have seen that coming? Oh, right. Anyone with functioning brain cells. I felt a stab of something that might have been sympathy. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you, though? His laugh was bitter. Come on, Mom. You hated her. I didn't hate her, David. I just saw her clearly. I closed the cash drawer with more force than necessary. Did you call because you want something? Or because you want to make amends? I want to make amends. I want to fix this. Then start by pleading guilty to the fraud charges and paying back every penny you stole. After that, we can talk about amends. The line went quiet. Finally, the lawyers say, if I plead guilty, I'll definitely go to jail. David, you forged my signature and stole $200,000. You belong in jail. I hung up on him again and locked the restaurant door behind me. Across the street, Ashley's boutique was dark, a for lease sign already taped in the window. Apparently, she'd decided to cut her losses and run before David's legal troubles could taint her precious reputation. Justice, I thought as I walked home to Marcus's carriage house, sometimes looked exactly like an empty storefront and a pile of unpaid bills. The review came out the following Thursday morning. 5 stars and a write-up that made me sound like some sort of culinary genius instead of a former diner waitress who'd learned to cook from necessity. Second Chances offers exactly what its name promises, Charlotte Stevens had written. A chance to experience comfort food elevated to art, served by people who understand that hospitality is about more than just food. Eleanor framed the review and hung it by the front door. Marcus brought champagne. The phone rang all day with reservation requests. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was standing in my kitchen at home, staring at a letter that had been forwarded from my old address, official-looking, with a return address I didn't recognize. The letter was from David's criminal attorney, requesting a meeting to discuss potential resolution options that might benefit all parties involved. Translation: they wanted to make a deal. I was still holding the letter when Marcus knocked on my back door. You missed our evening walk, he said, then saw my face. What's wrong? I handed him the letter without a word. He read it twice, his expression growing darker with each pass. You're not actually considering this, are you? I don't know. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs. He's my son, Marcus. Yes, he betrayed me. Yes, he stole from me. But he's still my son. Marcus sat across from me, reaching for my hands. Helen, look at me. What do you think will happen if you drop the charges? He'll get his life back together, learn from his mistakes, be grateful for a second chance. And what do you think will happen to the next elderly person he decides to help manage their finances? The question hit like a slap. I'd been so focused on David as my son that I'd forgotten to think about David as a criminal who targeted vulnerable people. You think he's done this before? I think people who forge signatures for $200,000 don't usually start with their own mothers. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. I think you dropping charges sends a message that elder abuse is okay as long as you apologize afterward. That night, I called Patricia and asked her to arrange the meeting with David's lawyer, not because I wanted to make a deal, but because I wanted to hear what they thought my son's freedom was worth. The meeting was set for the following Monday morning. Eleanor insisted on coming as my advocate. Marcus offered to take the day off work. I told them both I needed to handle this alone. David's lawyer turned out to be a smooth-talking man in his 40s who probably charged more per hour than I'd made in a month at the diner. The kind of lawyer who could make armed robbery sound like a community service project. He laid out their offer with the confidence of someone who'd done this dance many times before. Your son is prepared to plead guilty to a misdemeanor fraud charge, make full restitution over 5 years, and accept 3 years probation in exchange for you dropping the felony charges, he explained. He'd also be willing to sign a statement taking full responsibility and acknowledging the harm he caused. And if I don't accept, then we go to trial, which could take months and cost you tens of thousands in legal fees, and there's no guarantee of conviction on the felony charges anyway. I studied the man across from me, with his expensive suit and practiced empathy. Where is David in all this? Doesn't he want to speak for himself? My client felt it would be more productive if we handled the negotiations professionally. Of course he did. Even now, even facing jail time, David couldn't be bothered to face me himself. He'd rather hide behind lawyers and let other people clean up his mess. Some things never change, like my son's allergy to personal responsibility. I'll consider your offer, I told the lawyer. You'll have my answer by Friday. But I already knew what my answer would be. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, which seemed appropriate for what I had to do. I'd asked Patricia to schedule a conference call with David's lawyer for 10 o'clock. Eleanor and Marcus both wanted to be there for support, but I needed to do this alone. At exactly 10, my phone rang. "Ms. Camden," David's lawyer began in his oily professional voice. "Have you had a chance to consider our proposal?" "I have." And? And the answer is no. A pause. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?" "No. N-O. I will not be dropping the charges against my son." My voice was steady, calm. I'd practiced this moment for days. "David will face the full consequences of his actions in a court of law." "Ms. Camden, I think you may be making an emotional decision here. Perhaps we could arrange another meeting where your son could speak with you directly." My son had 43 years to speak with me directly. He chose to forge my signature instead. I looked out my kitchen window at the restaurant, where the lunch crowd was already starting to gather. Besides, this isn't an emotional decision. It's a business decision. A business decision? David stole from me. But more than that, he taught me something valuable about my own worth, about what happens when you let people take advantage of your love for them. I pulled out the newspaper clipping Eleanor had shown me that morning. Did you know there were 6 other elderly fraud cases in this county last year, all involving family members? Silence on the other end of the line. I won't be responsible for enabling my son to hurt other people the way he hurt me. That's not love. That's cowardice. Ms. Camden, if this goes to trial, your son could face 5 to 10 years in prison. Then maybe he should have thought about that before he decided to commit fraud. I hung up the phone and immediately called Patricia to confirm that we were proceeding to trial. 20 minutes later, as I was getting ready to head to the restaurant, David called me directly. "Mom, please," he said without preamble. "I'm begging you, don't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you, David. You did this to yourself. 5 years in prison, Mom. 5 years of my life gone because I made one mistake. One mistake. $200,000 in forged documents was apparently just one little oopsie, like accidentally putting salt in your coffee instead of sugar. $200,000 isn't one mistake. It's 200,000 individual decisions to steal from your mother." He was crying now. I was desperate. The business was failing. Ashley was threatening to leave. I couldn't think straight. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did hurt me. You threw me away like garbage, remember? You told me I was too old to live with decent people. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. But please, don't send me to prison. I'll pay you back every penny. I'll do whatever you want." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar tug of maternal instinct warring with everything I'd learned about myself in the past months. "David, what would you do if someone stole $200,000 from your children?" "That's different." "How is it different?" Because, he couldn't finish the sentence. "Because you think I don't matter as much as they would. Because you think I'm old and my money is really your inheritance anyway. Because you think being my son gives you the right to take whatever you want from me." The silence stretched so long, I thought he'd hung up. "I love you, Mom," he said finally. "I love you too, David. That's why I'm not going to enable you to hurt anyone else." This time, when I hung up, I turned off my phone. I had a restaurant to run, a life to live, and a future to build. And for the first time in months, that future felt entirely my own. The trial took place 6 months later, lasting 3 days. David pleaded not guilty, despite the mountain of evidence against him, apparently hoping that a jury would be sympathetic to a son who'd just been trying to help his elderly mother manage her finances. His new lawyer, the expensive one, had apparently dropped him when the plea deal fell through, painted me as a vindictive old woman who was punishing her son for trying to look out for her best interests. Ah, yes, the bargain bin legal defense. Blame the victim. Classic. I sat in the front row every day, watching my son lie under oath about his motives and my mental capacity. Eleanor sat beside me, occasionally squeezing my hand when the testimony got particularly brutal. Marcus sat behind us, a steady presence I could feel even when I couldn't see him. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. Forged signatures on loan documents dating back 2 years. $200,000 in fraudulent loans. My son's own recorded confession when I'd called him from Patricia's office. The pattern of financial abuse that had started small. A credit card here, a bank transfer there, and escalated until he was using my house as collateral for his failing business. But the moment that broke everything open came when the prosecutor called Ashley to the stand. My former daughter-in-law walked into that courtroom like she was attending a charity luncheon, perfectly dressed and composed. She took the oath with the same fake sweetness she'd used to kick me out of my own house. Amazing how someone could look so polished while getting ready to throw their husband under the bus. Ms. Rodriguez, the prosecutor began, you were married to the defendant for 2 years, correct? Yes. During that time, did he ever discuss his mother's finances with you? Ashley glanced at David, who was staring at the table like it might offer him an escape route. Yes, he talked about her money sometimes. What did he say? He said she was sitting on a gold mine and didn't even know it. That the house was worth a fortune, and she was too old to enjoy it anyway. The courtroom went dead silent. Did he ever discuss plans to access that money? Ashley's composure finally cracked. He said she wouldn't live forever, and someone needed to make sure her assets were being managed properly. He said he was just accelerating the inevitable. Accelerating the inevitable? He said she was going to leave him everything anyway, so it didn't really matter if he borrowed against it now. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. David hadn't just stolen from me. He'd been planning to steal from me, possibly for years. Eleanor later explained that Ashley had been offered immunity in exchange for her testimony, which made perfect sense. She'd known about the fraud and said nothing, making her complicit. The prosecution had given her a choice: testify against David or face charges herself. The defense attorney tried to repair the damage on cross-examination, but Ashley's testimony had been too specific, too damning. When she stepped down from the witness stand, she didn't look at David or at me. She just walked out of the courtroom like she was walking out of our lives forever. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. David got 7 years, with the possibility of parole in 5. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time, not with anger or resentment, but with something that might have been understanding. I'm sorry, Mom, he said quietly. I know you are, I replied. I'm sorry, too. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor and Marcus flanked me like bodyguards as reporters shouted questions about elder abuse and family betrayal. I ignored them all, walking steadily toward Marcus's car with my head held high. How do you feel? Eleanor asked as we drove away. I thought about the question seriously. How did I feel? Sad, certainly. Relieved, definitely. But something else, too. Something I hadn't felt in so long, I'd almost forgotten what it was like. Free, I said finally. I feel free. That night, Marcus and I sat on his back porch, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the stars come out. The restaurant was closed on Mondays, giving us time to just be together without the rush of customers and responsibilities. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. No, I said, and was surprised to realize it was true. I regret that it came to this. I regret that David made the choices he made, but I don't regret standing up for myself. Marcus reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady. For what it's worth, I think you're the strongest person I've ever met. I laughed. Strong? Marcus, 6 months ago, I was living in garbage bags because I was too weak to stand up to my own son. No, he said firmly. 6 months ago, you were grieving and trusting and hoping your family would treat you with the love you deserved. That's not weakness, that's human. Strength is what you did after you realized they wouldn't. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights come on in the houses around us. Normal people living normal lives, probably taking for granted that their children wouldn't steal from them, or their spouses wouldn't abandon them. What a luxury that must be, trusting your family not to forge your signature. I have something to tell you, Marcus said suddenly. My stomach clenched. What? He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and my heart stopped entirely. I know it's only been 6 months. I know we're both still figuring this out. But Helen, I haven't felt this happy in years, and I don't want to waste whatever time we have left being careful. He opened the box to reveal a simple diamond ring, elegant and classic and perfect. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm asking if you'd consider building whatever comes next together. I stared at the ring, then at his face, then back at the ring. 8 months ago, I'd been a discarded mother living on crumbs of affection from people who saw me as a burden. Now I was a successful business owner being proposed to by a man who thought I was worth fighting for. Yes, I said, laughing through sudden tears. Yes, I would very much like to build whatever comes next together. As Marcus slipped the ring onto my finger, I thought about second chances and new beginnings and the unexpected ways life could surprise you just when you thought the story was over. Turned out I'd been wrong about a lot of things. But I'd been right about one thing. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.